Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Jamal drove through the city streets with a quiet determination. He was 28 but felt older. Working 16-hour rideshare shifts had become his way of life, part survival, part penance for a past he barely recalled. Night after night, he ferried strangers across neon-lit avenues and dim side roads, each passenger absorbed in their own world. They rarely remembered him once they stepped out of his car. He lived in a cramped single-room apartment, sending most of his earnings to the women's shelter where he'd grown up. Its faded sign and worn walls were reminders of the nights he spent there, listening to staff soothe children who had no other home. He had vowed never to forget where he came from. This evening, rain hammered the streets. The city glistened beneath storm clouds. Jamal's phone chimed, a pickup at a towering high-rise downtown. The marble-floored lobby and gleaming lights spoke of wealth beyond his grasp. When he arrived, an elderly man with silver hair and a polished cane stepped forward. "I'll sit in the front if you don't mind," he said quietly. He introduced himself as Mr. Balfour, settling into the passenger seat with careful motion. Jamal pulled away, the rain beating against the windshield. Balfour took in the worn interior. "Long night?" he asked. "Every night's long," Jamal replied, surprised that someone so refined wanted to ride beside him. "You remind me of someone," Balfour said after a pause. "My son." The words jarred Jamal. He'd been called many things, reliable, polite, invisible, but never someone's son. He gripped the steering wheel, unsure how to respond. They drove in near silence, with only the rhythm of wipers and the hum of tires on wet pavement. Eventually, Jamal ventured a question. "Is your son still around?" Balfour's face tightened. "We haven't spoken in years." His voice held a hint of regret, echoing the loneliness Jamal had witnessed at the shelter. After 20 minutes, they reached a gated estate. Tall iron gates opened onto a driveway framed by pristine hedges and an ornate fountain. Balfour turned to Jamal before exiting. "Thank you," he said, pressing a $50 bill into his hand. "And thank you for letting me sit up front." Jamal nodded as the older man disappeared behind imposing doors. Something about the encounter left him unsettled. He drove off to his next fare, but thoughts of Balfour nagged at him. Why mention a son to a stranger? Hours later, Jamal returned to his apartment, exhausted. He tossed his keys on a rickety table and flopped onto his sagging mattress, thinking of the shelter's leaky roof and how he might fix it someday. Yet his mind drifted back to Balfour's quiet voice. "You remind me of my son." After the front gates closed behind Balfour, Jamal had lingered, absorbing the opulence around him, manicured hedges, a glowing mansion in the storm. He wondered what it would be like to live free from the burden of bills. Still, he could not shake the old man's sorrowful tone. Balfour's remark struck a chord. Jamal recalled the shelter's children, many of whom would never know a father. He remembered nights spent hoping a father might appear and promise to stay. That hope never materialized. When Jamal finally drove away, the city felt eerily quiet, the usual horns and chatter drowned out by the downpour. Streetlights shimmered on puddles like scattered jewels. A sense of foreboding brewed in his chest, fueled by the haunted look in Balfour's eyes. He picked up 2 more passengers, a weary nurse and a college student rushing home, both too tired for conversation. By the time he ended his shift, dawn peeked over the horizon, casting a pale glow on the wet streets. Climbing creaking stairs to his apartment, he felt fatigue pressing down on him. Yet, even as he shed his damp clothes, his thoughts circled back to Balfour. He recalled the man's cane, his trembling hands, and the burden he carried beneath a veneer of wealth. Falling onto his bed, Jamal wished he'd asked more. Why mention his son to a rideshare driver? Why choose the front seat? Rain tapped gently against the window now, a lullaby for a city that never truly slept. Before exhaustion claimed him, Jamal promised himself that if he ever saw Balfour again, he wouldn't let the moment pass without learning more. He sensed that their paths were not yet finished crossing. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, he clung to the fragile hope that this stranger's pain might illuminate answers Jamal had long sought about his own life and the father he never knew. Jamal's father had always been a phantom presence in his life, a name he never knew, a face he never saw. At the shelter, other children sometimes spoke of dads who might come back one day, but Jamal never indulged in such fantasies. For him, a father was simply an absence, an empty chair at every meal. Over time, he learned to fill that void with work and responsibility, never daring to hope for more. Yet Balfour's melancholy and the strange resonance of, "You remind me of my son," unsettled him. Could it be that some fathers regretted their failures? Could a man with wealth and power still carry the same haunting loneliness Jamal did? The questions gnawed at him, refusing to let him rest. He felt restless. Early the next afternoon, Jamal lay half awake on his battered mattress, the pale sunlight cutting through the dingy curtains. His phone buzzed and he squinted at the screen, an unknown number. He considered ignoring it but thought better of it. Any call could mean another opportunity to earn extra money for the shelter. "Hello," he answered, voice still groggy. "Jamal?" The voice on the other end was calm, assured, and strangely familiar. "This is Mr. Balfour." Jamal jolted upright, nearly dropping his phone. He hadn't expected the mysterious passenger to call him directly. "Mr. Balfour," he repeated, struggling for composure. "How did you get my number?" "I asked the rideshare service," Balfour said. "I'd like to invite you to dinner tonight. My driver will pick you up at 7. It's at the Hamilton Club, a private place, but I have permission to bring a guest." Jamal paused, uncertainty knitting his brow. The Hamilton Club was legendary among the city's elite. People in Jamal's world never set foot inside unless they were cleaning tables or working the valet. "I'm not sure if I'm dressed for that kind of place," he said honestly, picturing his limited wardrobe. "I'll take care of everything," Balfour replied. "Just be ready by 7. Before Jamal could protest, the call ended. He stared at his phone, replaying the conversation in his mind. He had bills to pay and a shift that started soon, but the promise of a formal dinner at the city's most exclusive club was too intriguing to dismiss. Besides, something in Balfour's voice made it sound important, urgent, even. That evening, a sleek black car pulled up outside Jamal's building precisely at 7. The driver, a neatly dressed man who introduced himself as Roland, opened the rear door. Jamal settled into the plush leather seat, feeling a pang of self-consciousness. The city's passing lights reflected in the tinted windows, a swirl of neon and dusk. At the Hamilton Club, Jamal stepped out onto polished marble steps that led to colossal doors engraved with ornate patterns. Crystal chandeliers illuminated an interior filled with deep mahogany and hushed conversations. Roland escorted him through a labyrinth of corridors until they arrived at a private dining room. Inside, Balfour stood with a slight stoop, leaning on his cane. "Jamal," he greeted warmly, motioning for him to sit. The table was set for 2 with gleaming silverware and pristine white linens. A waiter stood discreetly nearby, ready to serve. Jamal cleared his throat. "I'm not exactly sure why I'm here, sir." Balfour lowered himself into a chair and took a moment to catch his breath. "I appreciate you coming," he began. "I know it's strange, but I wanted to talk to you in a more comfortable setting." He glanced at the waiter, who immediately poured 2 glasses of water. Jamal shifted, unsure how to sit or what to say. This level of luxury felt surreal. His gaze drifted to the polished wood paneling and the tasteful artwork hanging on the walls. Everything about this place said old money, quiet power, and exclusivity. "Why me?" Jamal finally asked, looking Balfour in the eye. Balfour lifted his glass. "I'm dying, Jamal. The doctors have given me a few months at best. My business empire will survive me, but my personal affairs are less tidy." A surge of sympathy mingled with shock. Jamal had suspected the man was ill. He moved slowly, and his voice sometimes wavered. But hearing it confirmed was jarring. "I'm sorry," Jamal said, at a loss for words. Balfour offered a wan smile. "Thank you. But I've made my peace. What troubles me more is the fact I have a son who won't speak to me." We drifted apart years ago, and now I have very little time to make things right. Jamal nodded, recalling how Balfour had mentioned his son during their ride. I see. Balfour leaned forward, eyes glinting with a mixture of desperation and resolve. I've called you here because I need a favor. An unusual one. I want you to pretend to be my son, just for one night. My board of directors is holding a final dinner in my honor, and they expect to see my heir. Jamal's eyes widened. That's a lot to ask. I'll pay you $50,000, Balfour said bluntly. All I need is for you to attend the dinner, play along, and say a few kind words. Then, at the end of the night, we part ways. $50,000. Jamal's mind whirled. That amount could revitalize the shelter, buy fresh beds, fix the crumbling roof. But the moral implications weighed heavily. I don't even know your son, he said hesitantly. How can I possibly fool people who must know him well? Balfour breathed out slowly. He's been gone for so long that most only remember him from old photos. I'll have my staff brief you on the basics. The dinner's tomorrow. Will you do it? Jamal's heart pounded. He thought of the shelter, of his own struggles. I don't know, he stammered. The older man's tone softened. I'm asking for one evening of kindness. One final chance to show the world that my son and I made amends. I need closure. Silence fell. Jamal glanced at the opulent surroundings, so far removed from his dingy apartment. $50,000 would transform many lives at the shelter. Ultimately, the decision crystallized in his mind. He swallowed hard. I'll do it. Balfour nodded, relief and sadness mingling in his features. Thank you, Jamal. You'll understand why I chose you soon enough. Morning arrived with a swirl of questions spinning through Jamal's mind. He had barely slept, wrestling with the morality of accepting Balfour's offer. But each time doubt surfaced, he pictured the shelter's peeling paint and the uncertain faces of the children. $50,000 would change everything. Maybe he could even quit driving nights, find a better job, and carve out a future he'd never thought possible. Promptly at 9, a sharp knock echoed through Jamal's apartment. He opened the door to find two people in tailored suits, Balfour's staff. A woman introduced herself as Marjorie, and the man beside her as Collins. Mr. Balfour has arranged for your attire and briefings, Marjorie explained briskly. We have a tight schedule. Shall we get started? Jamal felt overwhelmed but allowed them in. Over the next 2 hours, he was inundated with details about Balfour's supposed son, his habits, his favorite color, and snippets of family lore that Jamal might reference if anyone asked. Collins showed him old photos, a younger Balfour with a teenage boy, both smiling awkwardly at the camera. Are you sure the board won't see through this? Jamal asked, fidgeting. He wore simple clothes, which felt increasingly shabby as Marjorie laid out an expensive suit on his bed. Marjorie smiled gently. Mr. Balfour has explained that his son has changed. Different look, different lifestyle. Most of the board members haven't seen him in years. They won't question you if you seem comfortable. Comfortable. Jamal scoffed inwardly at the absurdity. He was about to impersonate a missing heir for a dying tech mogul. Yet the reasons he'd agreed, money for the shelter, a chance to give back, burned in his mind like a beacon. He tried to focus on that. Put these on, Marjorie said, pointing to the suit. We'll meet you downstairs once you're ready. They left Jamal alone. He stared at the designer's suit, feeling the softness of the fabric. Every stitch screamed privilege. When he finally slid it on, he barely recognized himself in the mirror. He looked like someone who belonged in a corporate boardroom, not in a battered sedan working rideshare hours. By late afternoon, they arrived at Balfour's mansion. This time, Jamal saw the grandeur in full daylight. A winding driveway led to a sprawling estate framed by tall hedges and marble statues. The mansion's pristine facade glowed under the sun. He was ushered inside, where Balfour greeted him with a nod. You look the part, the old man said, eyes scanning him from head to toe. Jamal tried a nervous smile. Let's hope I can act the part too. Balfour reached out a trembling hand, gesturing for Jamal to follow him. They walked through a corridor lined with paintings, portraits of ancestors, maybe. Eventually, They entered a lavish study dominated by a massive oak desk. "Before dinner, I want you to meet some of the household staff," Balfour said. "They'll address you as the rightful son. It's important you respond naturally." One by one, housekeepers, gardeners, and personal assistants filed in. Each greeted Jamal warmly, using Mr. Balfour, Jr., or Young Master, with careful deference. Jamal's pulse quickened. He responded with polite nods, praying he wouldn't stumble. Then came the board members. They arrived in sleek cars, stepping into the grand foyer with practiced confidence. Expensive suits, calculated smiles, and a certain air of entitlement marked them as part of the corporate elite. They had come to celebrate Balfour's final dinner, though the tone was bittersweet, a last tribute to the man who had built their fortunes. Dinner was served in a regal dining hall, chandeliers casting golden light over a table set with crystal and silver. The board members talked among themselves, eyeing Jamal curiously but offering polite greetings. Marjorie hovered nearby, ready to guide him with discreet nods if he faltered. When Balfour stood to address the gathering, the room fell silent. He leaned on his cane, breathing unevenly. "Welcome," he began, voice trembling. "Tonight is special, not just because it might be our last dinner together, but because I'm joined by my son." He extended an arm toward Jamal. "He's returned to me after many years. I'm grateful." Jamal's stomach twisted. He forced a smile and inclined his head, feeling dozens of eyes watching his every movement. Applause followed, though it felt muted by an undercurrent of surprise. A few board members exchanged glances, possibly recalling the real son's absence. Despite his nerves, Jamal found himself warming to the role. The conversation ebbed and flowed, with toasts and light banter. At one point, a board member with silver-rimmed glasses turned to Jamal and asked, "So, what have you been up to all these years?" Jamal glanced at Marjorie. She offered a tiny nod. Sticking to the script, he smiled. "Traveling mostly. Spent time overseas finding myself." The board member chuckled. "Youthful adventures. Good for you." Gradually, Jamal relaxed into the fabricated persona. He recounted rehearsed anecdotes, made up stories about scenic places. The board members drank, laughed, and listened, seemingly content to accept him as Balfour's long-lost son. Jamal marveled at how easily a well-tailored suit and a confident tone could overwrite skepticism. As dessert arrived, Balfour rose again, glass in hand. "I want to toast my son," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I may have built empires, but having him here, it means more to me than all the money in the world." Jamal felt a rush of conflicting emotions. He had never experienced paternal love, yet Balfour's words stirred something akin to longing within him. Cameras flashed as people captured the moment. He forced himself to maintain a dignified smile. In the next instant, Balfour's face went pale. His hand shook, spilling wine onto the tablecloth. Then, like a marionette whose strings had been cut, he collapsed. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Jamal lurched forward, catching the old man's frail body. Balfour's eyes fluttered open for a moment, and he gripped Jamal's hand. His voice was a faint whisper. "The truth is in the letter," he said. "It's time." Panic seized the room. Paramedics were called. As they rushed Balfour away, Jamal stood there, breathless, the cameras still clicking. He could only wonder what new secrets lay hidden behind those final words. An hour later, Jamal found himself in the quiet waiting area of a private hospital wing. The buzz of fluorescent lights and the sterile smell of antiseptics set his nerves on edge. Balfour had been rushed in, unconscious, still gripping Jamal's hand until the paramedics forced them apart. Marjorie and Collins hovered nearby, their professionalism cracked by worry. Now that the dinner facade had ended, Jamal felt exposed. He still wore the expensive suit, but it might as well have been a costume in a play that had abruptly lost its lead actor. A man in a crisp suit approached. "Mr. Jamal?" His voice was soft, yet carried authority. "I'm Hudson, Mr. Balfour's attorney. He asked me to give you something." Hudson handed Jamal a sealed envelope. Jamal's name was scrawled on it in shaky handwriting. "He wanted you to read it immediately if anything happened to him." Jamal's pulse thundered in his ears. Carefully, he opened the envelope. Inside was a neatly folded letter on thick stationery, along with photographs and official-looking documents. He swallowed hard and began to read. Jamal, there's no easy way to say this. You're not pretending to be my son. You are my son. Years ago, I had an affair with a woman named Delilah. She disappeared without a word, and my attempts to find her failed. I only learned of your existence through third-hand accounts much later. By the time I tracked you down, you'd already been placed in the shelter. I tried to approach you, but I couldn't. Cowardice, shame, fear, I can't excuse it. But I never stopped watching over you from a distance. Jamal's hands shook. He flipped to the documents. A birth certificate, DNA test results, even old photos of Delilah holding a baby. Each piece of evidence pointed to one staggering truth. Balfour was his father. You grew up thinking no one cared, the letter went on, but that wasn't true. I funded the shelter anonymously to keep it afloat. It was my way of protecting you when I couldn't be there. And now, I've waited too long to tell you face to face. Forgive me, son. Tears blurred Jamal's vision. He set the letter aside and looked at the photos. One showed a tiny teddy bear, a toy he remembered vaguely from childhood. He had never known where it came from or who had given it to him. Now he did. Hudson cleared his throat. Mr. Balfour also prepared a video statement. If you'll follow me? His expression was gentle, as though he understood the emotional bombshell that had just gone off in Jamal's life. They moved to a small conference room where a laptop sat on a polished table. Hudson clicked a file. Balfour's face appeared on screen, frail, but resolute. Jamal, the recording began, if you're watching this, it means I couldn't tell you in person. I have many regrets, but my greatest is not being there for you. I'm sorry you had to grow up alone, believing your father didn't exist. But you do exist, and you matter more to me than you can ever know. In the video, Balfour drew a shaky breath. I hired you to play a role because I was afraid you'd refuse if you knew the truth. I needed the world to see us together, to show that we reconciled, even if it was only for one night. Now, you're free to walk away, or stay. That choice is yours. Jamal's heart pounded so hard it hurt. Guilt, anger, grief, and a flicker of hope collided inside him. But why this elaborate charade? The video ended with Balfour saying, I love you, son, followed by a final, trembling gaze that lingered on the screen. He closed the laptop, his breathing uneven. Marjorie and Colin stood near the door, eyes cast down respectfully. Hudson placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. Mr. Balfour insisted you receive all legal documentation affirming you as his heir. It's rock solid. There's also a trust fund, enough to change your life. Jamal's voice trembled. I don't care about the money right now. I need to see him. Hudson's gaze dropped. He's in critical condition. They're doing everything they can. Without another word, Jamal rushed back to the hospital room. Machines beeped softly, tubes and wires connecting Balfour to the line between life and death. Jamal stood at the foot of the bed, tears sliding down his cheeks. Despite the swirl of betrayal and confusion, he felt an overpowering wave of compassion. I'm here, he whispered. I'm sorry I didn't know. He found a chair and sat, remembering the few times he'd wondered if his father was out there. Now that he knew, it was almost too much to bear. His mind replayed every instance Balfour had tried to protect him, funding the shelter, leaving that teddy bear. It wasn't enough to erase the years of absence, but it was something. A tangled act of love, guilt, and fear. Through the night, Jamal waited, dozing off occasionally to the hum of the medical equipment. At dawn, a nurse gently touched his shoulder. He's not responding well, she said softly. We're not sure how much longer he has. A tightness squeezed Jamal's chest. He leaned in close to Balfour's ear. I'm here, he repeated, praying some part of the old man could hear him. The memory of Balfour's final whisper played in his mind. The truth is in the letter. It's time. It was time indeed, time for Jamal to accept or reject the man who had brought him into the world, only to remain a distant figure. As the sun rose, bathing the hospital room in pale light, Jamal made a promise to himself. If his father survived, he would demand answers. If not, he would forge his own path, guided by the revelations of that night. In the corridor, Hudson approached again. Jamal, the press is already running stories about a fake son. The board members are confused. People are calling it a hoax. Jamal's eyes flared. They have no idea. Hudson nodded. They will soon enough. Once Mr. Balfour's final statement is released, the truth will come out. Gripping the edge of the doorway, Jamal steeled himself. Let them talk, he whispered. I just want my father to live. Balfour passed away the next day before Jamal could say a real goodbye. The official cause was heart failure, compounded by multiple underlying conditions. News of his death spread like wildfire, and the media latched onto one headline above all. The dying millionaire had hired a fake son in his final days. Photos from the board dinner showed Balfour's emotional toast, Jamal by his side, looking every bit the long-lost heir. Grief rattled Jamal, but he had little time to process it. Reporters camped outside his dingy apartment, peppering him with questions he refused to answer. He couldn't understand how they'd found him so fast, until he saw that Balfour's estate press release had publicly named Jamal as the sole heir to a vast fortune. Calls bombarded his phone. Lawyers, journalists, even distant relatives of Balfour claiming partial inheritance. Some threatened lawsuits, accusing Jamal of fraud. One morning he awoke to find "Gold Digger" scrawled in graffiti on his building's front door. Let them say what they want, he muttered. His primary goal was to protect the shelter. Still, the cruelty stung. He had spent his life being invisible, and now the spotlight seared him. In the midst of the chaos, Hudson summoned Jamal to the estate for a formal reading of Balfour's will. Entering the study where he had once prepared to impersonate a son, Jamal found himself facing a half-dozen stern-faced individuals, members of the board, Balfour's ex-wife, and several high-powered attorneys. Marjorie and Colin stood behind him, offering silent support. Hudson cleared his throat. This is the last will and testament of Mr. Leonard Balfour, he began. He explicitly names Jamal Balfour, formerly known only as Jamal, as his legal and rightful son. All assets, including control of Balfour Tech and its subsidiaries, are transferred to him immediately. A low murmur spread through the room. Balfour's ex-wife, a woman with icy blue eyes, glared at Jamal. This is outrageous, she hissed. Everyone knows he hired this man to pretend to be his son. It's a farce. Hudson steeled himself. Mr. Balfour left indisputable proof, including DNA evidence and a recorded video statement. I have them here. He gestured to a laptop and a stack of documents. Anyone who wishes to contest it may try, but I assure you the evidence is ironclad. A bespectacled board member spoke up. What about the real son? We know he existed. Hudson pushed his glasses up. He did. And it appears Jamal is that very child, separated at birth from Mr. Balfour's official household. Murmurs intensified, but no one could refute the documentation. Still, hostility crackled in the air. Jamal clenched his jaw. He didn't want this fight, but it had come to him anyway. Balfour's ex-wife rose to her feet. I'll see you in court, she spat, casting a final glare at Jamal before storming out. Several board members followed in her wake, leaving only a handful behind, older men and women who seemed weary rather than furious. Marjorie moved closer to Jamal and touched his arm. I'm sorry for all this, she said quietly. Your father wanted better. Jamal exhaled. So did I. In the days that followed, a media circus ensued. Speculation ran rampant. Was Jamal truly Balfour's son, or a cunning opportunist? Did Balfour fabricate the documents to soothe his own guilt before dying? Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. Yet, for every doubter, there were supporters moved by the story of a forgotten son finally finding his place. Hudson scheduled a press conference at the estate. Jamal reluctantly agreed to speak, if only to clear the shelter's name from the swirling rumors. On the designated morning, cameras flashed as he stepped up to a podium erected on the mansion's grand lawn. I know many of you have questions, he began, voice trembling. I did too. I only learned recently that Mr. Balfour was my father. I never asked for this inheritance. I never even knew of his plan. Reporters fired questions. Did you trick him? What about the DNA? Why did he choose you over the rest of his family? Jamal held up a hand. I have proof that I am his biological son. I'm not here to gloat or claim some victory. The truth is, I grew up not knowing my father. We only had one dinner together, one chance to connect, before he passed. That is not a victory, it's a tragedy. A hush fell over the crowd. As for the inheritance, Jamal continued, I plan to use much of it to support the women's shelter where I grew up. Children there deserve a chance. I also want to build educational programs for underprivileged kids across the city, because no one should feel forgotten. A wave of murmurs spread, but this time the tone was different. Sympathy, curiosity, and perhaps respect flickered in journalists' eyes. The cameras kept rolling as Jamal stepped away, heart pounding. He knew the legal battles were far from over, but at least his intentions were clear. Behind the scenes, lawyers exchanged heated emails and phone calls, preparing for potential court cases. Balfour's ex-wife demanded a portion of the estate, even though the will explicitly excluded her. The board members, worried about their control over the company, talked of forcing Jamal out. But Balfour's final video evidence sealed many lips. In that recording, he spoke directly to the board, explaining Jamal's parentage and the reasons for his secrecy. Jamal deserves what I never gave him: resources, security, and a place in this world, Balfour said, voice trembling with regret. Support him, or step aside. Jamal watched the video alone in the study one evening, tears rolling down his cheeks. The father he'd longed for had finally reached out to him, but only when it was almost too late. Anger and gratitude warred within him, leaving him exhausted. Yet he found a strange solace in Balfour's final words, a plea to be better, to do better than he ever had. Even as lawsuits brewed, Jamal resolved to fulfill the promise he'd made during the press conference. He wouldn't hoard the wealth. He'd invest it in the shelter, in children's programs, and in building a future for those who might never get one otherwise. He might be Balfour's heir, but he was also still Jamal, the rideshare driver who once drifted through the city unnoticed. He wouldn't forget that. Standing in front of the old shelter, Jamal could hardly believe how much had changed in a few short months. Fresh paint covered the walls, the creaking roof had been replaced, and a new playground beckoned children outside. Workers bustled about, finalizing renovations funded by the inheritance. Jamal watched them install bright murals and sturdy beds, his heart swelling with gratitude. He thought back to his last shift as a rideshare driver, the night he met Balfour. The memory felt distant, like a dream. In the time since, his life had upended, from invisible driver to media sensation and, ultimately, recognized heir. Yet, for all the flashbulbs and legal battles, this moment, giving kids a safe, welcoming place, was what mattered. Inside the newly renovated common area, staff members clapped as Jamal walked in. They remembered him as the quiet teen who used to sweep floors and help serve food. Now, they saw him spearheading a transformation that offered hope to countless women and children. Amid the applause, Jamal raised a hand. I'm not doing this alone, he said. All of you made the shelter what it is. I'm just here to support your mission. Later that day, he convened a small press gathering, wanting to highlight the shelter's improvements rather than spark another inheritance scandal. Cameras flashed, capturing every detail. A reporter asked, Jamal, do you ever regret stepping into Balfour's life? He paused, reflecting. I regret that I didn't know him sooner, he said softly. But I believe everything happens in its own time. He wanted to right his wrongs, and I'm trying to carry on that spirit. Since Balfour's death, Jamal had also set up a trust fund for underprivileged youth, focusing on scholarship programs. The rest of the empire, Balfour Tech and its subsidiaries, he'd placed under a newly formed board of trustees, composed partly of individuals from marginalized communities. It was unconventional, but Jamal believed it would bring fresh perspectives to a corporate world often dominated by a privileged few. Not everyone was happy. Balfour's ex-wife had continued to stir controversy, appearing on talk shows to call Jamal a con artist. Some board members resigned, unwilling to see the company's future steered by someone they viewed as an outsider. Lawsuits flared, but each time, the evidence Balfour left behind stood firm. Jamal pressed on, guided by the vow he'd made at his father's bedside. One crisp morning, Jamal found himself walking through the headquarters of Balfour Tech. Employees whispered as he passed, some respectful, others suspicious. He stepped into the boardroom where a new set of directors waited. As he looked around the long conference table, he saw not just corporate veterans, but also teachers, social workers, and a few scrappy entrepreneurs who had grown up in tough neighborhoods, just like he had. "Welcome," Jamal said, clearing his throat. "We're here to shape a new direction for this company, to prove that success can uplift entire communities." A wave of enthusiasm rippled through the group. This was more than corporate speak. Jamal was determined to prove that the empire Balfour had built could be used for good, beyond making a privileged few even richer. After the meeting, he paced the hallway, feeling equal parts exhilarated and nervous. So much responsibility rested on his shoulders. In a glass case near the entrance, old photos of Balfour and his original board were displayed, relics of a different era. Jamal paused to study them. A pang of sadness coursed through him. He wished he could have asked his father more questions about life, family, and how to bear the weight of leading a company. A staff member cleared her throat behind him. "Mr. Balfour?" she asked gently. "Are you ready for the interview?" Jamal blinked. Being called Mr. Balfour still felt strange, but he nodded. The staffer escorted him to a media room, where a local journalist awaited, camera rolling. The reporter's first question was simple: "How does it feel to be at the helm of your father's legacy?" Jamal inhaled. "It's both an honor and a challenge. My father's legacy is complicated, but it gave me the chance to help people like me, people who never had a fair shot." That clip went viral overnight. Memes sprouted, some supportive, others mocking. But amidst the noise, a real sense of transformation took hold. Schools reached out, requesting partnerships. Community leaders asked for tech grants. Suddenly, Balfour Tech was associated with possibility, not just profit margins. Weeks later, Jamal returned to the shelter, now fully renovated and bustling with activity. Children laughed on the playground he'd funded, their voices echoing off bright walls. He knelt to chat with a young boy who clutched a worn teddy bear. The sight struck him deeply, reminding him of the bear in his father's letter. "You like that teddy?" Jamal asked gently. The boy nodded, hugging it tight. "He's my best friend," he whispered. Jamal swallowed hard, seeing a reflection of himself in the child's eyes. He remembered nights spent at the shelter, longing for someone to call family. And now he was here, in the role of a benefactor, a father figure to hundreds, maybe thousands, of kids who felt forgotten. He rose, pushing back tears. As he stepped away, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Marjorie, letting him know that the final legal battle had ended. The court upheld Balfour's will. Jamal was, without question, the rightful heir. Despite the swirling controversies, the law recognized him as Leonard Balfour's son. Closing his eyes, Jamal exhaled. His father's empire was now his to shape, and he would shape it for good. Stepping back into the sunlight, he smiled at the children playing. He thought of the father who had finally found him, too late but at least in time to make a difference. In a moment captured by a nearby journalist, Jamal walked into the shelter's courtyard. The final images broadcast around the world were not of a fake son, but of a man who had taken a broken legacy and used it to heal. Echoing across social media was a powerful sentiment. He pretended to be a son, until he found out he always was. And now? He's a father to 1,000 forgotten children. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.